Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Day in the Life. I'm your host, Darren. Joining me today is Bryant Steele, Vice President and Managing Director at Burns Wilcox. Welcome, Bryant.
Thanks for having me, Darren. Been a while since internship days.
Yeah, no, that's a good point there. I just kind of want to give a little overview of how we connected, or just kind of explain to the audience kind of like the networking side of this industry. So I reached out to you, LinkedIn, I'd say like mid-August of 2020. So, a while ago. And I think before that, we ran into each other at a WSIA, a career fair. So I just think, it's cool to just kind of describe, how we were able to kind of stay in contact during that. And then a spring internship. So it's, I'd say the spring internships or during the school year, I'd say it's kind of, unique of our industry. I think a lot of companies kind of push, like the summer internships, and can you kind of talk about that on your side, as kind of someone who's hiring, or, how did you kind of pitch, like a during the year, like internship?
Yeah, it was an interesting concept. Obviously, it started really with just Darren and I having a conversation. And in full disclosure, I've never had a spring intern before you. So you were the guinea pig, if you will. And typically for our internships, we've been in person, in offices, and, kind of getting to work with all the different teams. But what really Darren came to us was looking for something that was actually fairly specific. Really wanted to grow out his knowledge of professional liability and wanted to kind of pursue that passion. We saw that passion that he had for it. So we thought it would make sense to, obviously feed that as best we can, anyway, even just giving back to the industry, somebody who's excited and really wants to learn more. We decided to open the doors and bring him in. So normally, like I said, we would have somebody kind of shadow on a whole bunch of different teams, but we really just put him right into the team and kind of dove into everything that they're seeing, whether that's just day-to-day, processing an endorsement to, meeting with underwriters as best as possible. It was the situation I thought was very unique. And I don't know if it would be as easy to replicate as we did then, because you were also remote in school. Yeah. So we didn't have as much conflicts that way. And it was in an era of Zoom and Teams and WebEx, and everybody was very comfortable with it then. As people are getting more back into the, call it the real world of what we called insurance pre-2020. I don't know if it's as easy to replicate, but it was a really cool experience, and I think we learned a lot in doing it. And I obviously I know you did as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd say it's definitely a great example for the industry of just kind of opening the doors and making those opportunities. But on my side of it, now kind of starting in that virtual or hybrid kind of space like full time. I think like those internships were like kind of prepared me, in that way of just kind of like that flow of how to work remote, and like how to make sure that, I'm actually like doing work, or there's like stuff kind of on my plate, or like that I'm like contributing, to the team and being like visible. So I think, like as we do kind of figure out what the world looks like, after COVID, with hybrid or like fully in person, how do you think that internships are gonna kind of change or stay the same? Because why would you have a fully in-person internship if when the employee starts full time, it's going to be like hybrid? How do you kind of train that remote work aspect?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a learning experience for everybody. It's funny, we're knee deep in trying to figure that out currently for this summer. I actually am joining the committee for WSIA, so I'll be involved in kind of picking the interns, and also getting people to want to be interns, and then getting organizations that are willing to put the time and the money into hosting interns. I think it's an awesome experience. I think it's a great thing for our industry. I wish everybody did it. I understand that everybody doesn't have the capabilities to do so, but I really wish more people would be involved, and more organizations. But as somebody who's hosted, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 WSI interns over the years. Back when it was NAPSLO, we had NAPSLO interns, now WSI interns. And worth noting, you were not even our WSI intern. That wasn't the internship you had with us. But for I think it's going to be a challenge. I really do, because you're spot on. How would we have an intern come in 5 days a week, but don't have our employees here 5 days a week? So I think we're going to have to figure out a way to make it work, because it's something that our industry needs. And if you can't respond to, that pivot, I don't know how you're going to respond to this, the great resignation that's happening right now. If you're not willing to respond to some sort of flexibility, I think long term it's pretty short-sighted. So I think that we're going to have to do something different. I think it's going to be a hybrid type setup. I don't think you get as much out of it if it's completely virtual. I think that part we struggled with, and I think a lot of people struggled with, especially if you look at WSIA in particular, that short of a period of time to do all virtual becomes a little bit more difficult, because a lot of our business is a relationship business, and a lot of it you don't necessarily learn it via osmosis, but it's a lot easier to see somebody doing those things firsthand, and it's a little bit more challenging to show in a remote setting, at least if it's completely remote. So I think it'll be somewhere of a hybrid, to be honest.
No, definitely. I mean, yeah, just an overview of the WSA internship. 5 weeks out of carrier, 4 weeks at a brokerage, kind of half and half almost. So I did an internship, awesome program all around. Kind of feeds both sides and just kind of gives that holistic kind of approach to what's going on, in insurance. But to go back to what you were kind of talking about, from the management perspective with the great resignation, as you mentioned, and just kind of this current, war for talent in a way, like, in the insurance industry, like specifically, like how does that framework of kind of knowing what's going on kind of around you, how does that kind of make like your decisions from a management perspective like a little more complicated, of like how to return to the office, or like kind of, like maybe employees would have kind of more like power in a way than they used to, or just kind of like there's kind of more like bargaining kind of in a way, like available like on the employee side?
Yeah. I mean, good question. It's not like it's a meat market. It's these are people, these are careers, these are their livelihoods, and it's not like everyone's just lining up to purposely try and make changes. I don't think that's the industry right now. At least that's not the industry I want to be in. I do think that everybody's needs now more than ever are individualized, and I think you have to respond to what the individual is looking for. And when it's total employer dominance, it can be, we're just going to do this because we're going to do this, and you all don't have a choice. I think there are some people who are looking for more responsibility, and you're empowering them to advance their career. There are other people who are looking for more of the same and don't want disruption. And you just have to overly communicate with your employees to see if their goals align with your goals, and then create a structure that makes sense for the individual. Some people are looking for more flexibility, and some people are looking to get back into the office. I have 2 kids under the age of 3, which means during COVID, I've had a pregnant wife and a kid under the age of 1. I needed to get back in the office. I was living in a condo in the city. So if I had an employer who was 100% making me work remote, that wasn't good for me. I wanted to be in, but I have other employees who have moved to other parts of the country. I have another employee moved to a different country. So they were not going to be able to come into the office, 3 days a week. They live in Canada. They live 8 hours away, 3 time zones away. So, it's more so as long as we're communicating with what their goals are, what their expectations are, and then still managing a good workflow, I think that's where our industry is going to be going. It's not as much of a, structured in by 9, out by 5 for, all of your employees, which is a good thing. I mean, I think an employee-driven market is better than an employer-driven market. Empowering people is always great because this is an entrepreneurial space. So the more people that like to be challenged and have the, a long path in front of them, they tend to do pretty well in our industry in particular.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good overview. Can you kind of go back to, what you're saying? Obviously, it seems like I find it kind of interesting now, just myself kind of navigating of, who wants to go into the office, or like kind of like the situation, like you're saying, with kind of like daycare, like not being able to kind of focus like in the house. And then just kind of from like my perspective of like how often do you kind of currently, work from home, or if you weren't like in this management role that you were in, like as a manager, kind of being visible and like shaping kind of like the culture of the office, like would you be working from home more often if you weren't like in that management role?
Good question. Good question. Personally, I think it falls to the individual. I mean, we have in our office today, there's about a dozen people here, and they span the whole reach on, we have some younger folks that are in today. We have some people who have kids that are in today. Some come in a lot, some only come in a handful of days. So I don't necessarily think that you can, it's not fair to categorize a person based on what you think they want. I think people would say, well, you have kids at home, so you probably want to be at home. No, I love my kids to death, but I have kids at home, so that's why I want to come to the office. I have other people here who are single. They just like coming in the office. They like the structure of coming in, grabbing lunch. It's just part of their, their cycle that they enjoy with it. And then we have some people who fall in that same bucket who like the idea of working from home. Other people that are at home with their children and, have a nanny there, or have somebody who's able to, somewhere for their kids to go, but still just like not having a commute every day. Not having to kind of get dressed up and you can kind of do this job at home. So it really falls back on the individual. And I think that, Burns and Wilcox, just to talk about us as an employer, the first thing we did after COVID was announce that we are going to always have a flexible work environment. So we've already, as an organization, come out and said that, if flexibility is what you're looking for, we'll be an employer of choice in the long term, not just during COVID. It's easy to say that we're going to have a hybrid work environment during COVID, but it's a harder thing to say we're going to have a hybrid work environment after COVID. And that's the stance that we've gone out with. I mean, we still don't have anyone required to come into work. So we've been able to watch other employers require everybody, then send them all home because of an outbreak, and then require them all to come back, and then send everybody home, where we just kind of sat on the sidelines and watched it and said, if you'd like to go in, you can go in. If you'd like to stay at home, stay home. So I'd rather take the wait and see approach.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And can you go back to what you were saying about, some employees moving out of state during COVID, and even one employee moving out of the country? That's really interesting to kind of navigate. Like how does this kind of complicate like your strategy as a manager, and also like creating culture? Like how do you kind of replicate, those relationships or those kind of spontaneous conversations outside of the office?
It's difficult. It's hard. Great question, but I don't have a really, there's no silver bullet answer, because it is hard. It's hard to maintain that relationship when you can't see them on a regular basis. So, we try to do as much meetings and make the virtual options acceptable. And honestly, like we have a call every Monday, and I'm taking it right here, and other people are sitting at their desk also taking it virtually. We don't all go in the conference room and kind of silo out the people who aren't in the room, and make them dial in and feel like they're on the screen and not in person. So we really try and make everybody feel like we're all doing it virtually, even though 10 of us are all virtual from the same area, just to make it not look like we're punishing those who aren't here. But it's difficult. I mean, it's hard. At the beginning of COVID, I think I tried to call everybody until you realize, I got 100 people to call. And there's a lot of phone calls just to try and stay up with, what's going on in everybody's life. So it's not, it's difficult to replace that, call it like water cooler type talk. But I think it's a moving target. And I don't know what the answer is, but we're trying as best we can.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a really good point of kind of like just in my case. So like, I've been in the office a few times where we're on, a Teams call. There's like 4 people in the office, the echoes are all going, you're figuring out, the headsets, and then someone's behind you, it's on the same call, you're hearing them before you hear like the Teams call. And like that's kind of odd, right? But like then you have a couple people like, in New York that are hopping on the same call. So like, they couldn't be there if they really wanted to. But like I never thought about it from what you're saying of like, if you go to the conference room and you kind of make that in-person kind of physical feel, that could make the other people feel like excluded, which like I didn't think of at all. So like, can you kind of talk more kind of about that?
Yeah, I mean that was kind of it. I just don't. I don't want anyone to feel like you get a prize if you go into work and you're punished if you don't. I don't. There's no trophy for a number of hours, accumulated at your desk. But we do want to reward people's success in, their real success of their job. So we try and do those things as totally different. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a lot easier to create a culture where people go in. So I'm encouraging people, if they would like to be here, give it a chance, see what it's like when you're here, see if it's any better. At least for me, my office is my basement at my house. So I like coming in because I'm not working in the basement. So, kind of leave your house and at least see if you enjoy it. But I certainly don't want someone to feel, it gets back to that further, or that first question of, are you worried about people resigning or something like that? Like, I don't want to make someone go find a new job because I required them to sit in these 4 walls if that's something that makes them uncomfortable. That's just not me. But I would like to see people back in, because I think it's fun. So I got in this business. I mean, we were joking around about it. Like, there's a happy hour for the carrier today, and I'm excited to go see a lot of, even though it's just carriers and competitors, but I'm excited to just be around a lot of people that I'm friends with in this business. Yeah. And seeing those people in an office, kind of excites me as well. And it does make it easier to communicate on short little things. Walk by somebody's desk and say, hey, did you send me that or not? Whereas having to call them and, it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just kind of for some perspective for the audience here, like how many, in your current role, like how many offices are you managing? How many kind of people, or can you put some kind of numbers to it?
Yeah, so direct oversight, which would just be like the Chicago office. So we got about 50 people here. And that's everything from personal lines to professional lines, property, casualty, and small business binding authority. So all those groups, and then oversight over or involved in the management of Wisconsin, our office in Milwaukee, which is about another 10 people, another 15 people up in Minneapolis, and then just recently started getting involved in our Michigan branch, because I'm actually born and raised, of all things, from Farmington Hills, Michigan, which is where we're headquartered. So the office over there, I've been trying to get a little involved in there, because I do have, like I said, 2 young kids, and I go back to Farmington Hills for my young kids to see their grandparents and their uncle. So when I'm back there, it made it a lot easier to look into trying to work with that office as well as the next step in my career.
Yeah. And can you kind of describe, the overlap with like the Kaufman group kind of briefly, like within Burns and Wilcox, or how like kind of is structured?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Kaufman group is our parent company. Burns and Wilcox is the flagship brand, if you will, under Kaufman Group. So it's about 14 or so companies, everything from a carrier to premium financing, inspections. We have a handful of London brokers. We have some capabilities all across the world. We have a lot of offices and a lot of products in Canada. We have our own insurance carrier, if I didn't mention that part, the team. So there's a whole bunch of companies under Kaufman, but Burns and Wilcox is the original flagship brand. It represents the largest chunk of the business, far and away, of Burns and Wilcox, and of Kaufman Financial. And what we are is obviously a wholesale broker, no channel ties to retail. It's the only space. All those other companies that we have, none of them are, and none of them ever will be, a retail insurance agent. That's our client base. So we essentially sell wholesale products to the retail market. It's kind of a soup to nuts overview of the company. We're family owned, owned by the Kaufman family. Our Herb Kaufman was our founder. He's no longer with us, but his son, Alan Kaufman, is our current CEO. And then Alan's son, Danny, is our current president. And then overseeing Canada is Danny's sister, Jody. So the family is very much so involved in the organization still.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. Just kind of like there's no conflict of interest with, like these retailers, like them sending you submissions, kind of feeling like their competitor parent, and kind of like with with what you're saying of like, it's a private company. It's it's not gonna go public, but like it's like just kind of in my short time there, like I just kind of noticed it's kind of run maybe like a public company, just kind of very open with like like the financials, or just kind of what's going on with like earnings. And then just from like your management style, just kind of seeing like with those monthly or weekly calls, like you mentioned, just kind of going over like how the producers are doing, and where is the opportunity, and where is kind of the potential for growth, maybe cross-selling different lines of business, and just kind of like how did you kind of develop that strategy, and how do you kind of see that like advancing?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously a very private company when you look at it, and we're owned by a family. But then we're also very transparent with our employees. So I think that's kind of I'm going to say the secret sauce, where we don't necessarily have to do something because a private equity company wants to make a change, or they're trying to sell, or they're trying to earn their dollar. Or we don't have to be really beholden to shareholders, and we can put an investment in this, even though it could be a long-term investment. It really doesn't have to really fill the needs of shareholders. But then we're also a very transparent company, so everybody kind of knows where they stand. They also then I feel like when you have these, a lot of just up and comers or people that want to build their own entrepreneurial type setup, I think it's good for them to see what other people have done successfully. So they're able to kind of have a little bit something to shoot at, if you will. So we tend to be maybe overly transparent with our employees. You can get an idea of really where you stand. Like you said, I mean, in our office, almost on a weekly basis, we don't broadcast those numbers on the internet, but internally, people have a good understanding of what business is coming in and where it's coming in from. And you mentioned the cross-selling. We could have a ton of success. I'll pick on professional liability, which is a group you were obviously part of. if someone in that group is having a ton of success with a retailer, well, that's a great, the other groups would obviously recognize that success and look at that as an opportunity to then go in front of that same client. Because if they had a great experience with some of the brokers here, they would think that they probably would have a good experience with, another group. So being overly transparent in that, I think, also provides a little bit more areas for future success.
Yeah, and kind of, in your personal like management structure of not having, like a book of business versus, at some competitors, maybe the office manager would have, like a book of business. How do you think that's kind of like an advantage for you managing just kind of like the overall, structure of the office?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and I've gone back and forth on, the advantages and disadvantages of having your own book of business. Because obviously I'd like to be a producer too and have my book at times, because it's very lucrative, and that's why we all get in the insurance business. That's why a lot of us get in the insurance business. But I do think that my producers have a slight advantage with me not having a book, because I want their success. I can't put my own success in front of them. So if a good deal comes across my desk, it's not, I can't do anything with it myself. So, my producers get a lot of business that way. And I'm constantly out in front of retail clients because they're my clients, and a lot of them are my closest friends as well. So I'm obviously out trying to sell for all of them. And my success comes off of their success. So it doesn't, it's an advantage of mine to continue to kind of help get them more deals in the door whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully and I'm not saying that the people who manage some of the other offices of my competitors are always putting themselves first, but if you were a producer doing the same thing as your boss, you couldn't help but think that anything that comes in, they're not going to think of themselves first, because we're all humans.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And just kind of with what you're saying about, your past career path of kind of like having your own book or being kind of like a broker, like how did kind of those roles, maybe before Burns or early at Burns in your career kind of prepare you for like that management role? And kind of at what point, did you think that you wanted to go into management?
Yeah, deep question. So I did start at Burns as a producer. I was a property broker for a number of years here. I didn't, apply here because I wanted to be the manager of Chicago or the Midwest. I came on here as really just wanting to build up my own book of business to start. And I think I really enjoyed the working with my other coworkers and other brands, and traveling with them and visiting clients and kind of experiencing their growth. And I got excited for their growth as much as my own. And I think that's when I started to realize that maybe I was better positioned to be a manager. When I got as excited when, back in the day, I think Brad Coughlin was one of the guys I used to travel a lot with. But he's no longer in the business. But when I realized I was as excited when he wrote a deal as when I wrote my own, it probably made me realize that I probably am better off trying to turn this into a role where I'm able to get compensated on other people's success. Because why not? I mean, I get as excited for it anyways.
Yeah.
And really helping them develop a good book of business as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just kind of, in your position, or I guess any management role, like in general, I would kind of think that at a point, it might be kind of hard to stay like proactive versus like reactive to other people's, not like problems, but kind of like kind of waiting for, being reactive, putting out fires to the people that you are managing and kind of like helping them in that way, versus like being proactive and kind of, doing the long-term strategies and just kind of like being more forward focused instead of kind of being kind of stuck kind of like in like the current moment. How do you kind of balance that?
I mean, it's difficult. Yeah, I mean, things do come up in people's lives. It's you can't prepare for everything. Um, we're fortunate that we have a really good plan for maternity and paternity leave. So it's like I can't plan for somebody eventually to be on paternity leave. Like I don't know when somebody's going to have a child, or I can't plan when somebody else is going to go on maternity leave. So I can't plan for that. So there's obviously things you have to react on, and everything can't be proactive. But I do think as long as you create a culture where other people want everybody's success, it makes it easier, and that makes if that makes sense. So when everybody is on the same page, we can kind of address the problems as they come in. But you're constantly obviously trying to be outwardly focused. So it's a combination of both. I don't think anybody has the secret to that, and if they do, Godspeed. I don't.
They probably write a book about it or something.
Correct. Yeah. Then if they do, tell me the name of the book, because I don't know the answers.
Yeah.
At least not to that.
So kind of with your current role, working at a wholesaler, what would kind of your role like look like if you were at like a carrier or kind of at like a retailer, kind of still like in that like that management role, if you can kind of describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably similar to like just what an office president would look like. I mean, I oversee between all the offices, 75 people or 100 people, I guess, depending on how the business is looking at that given time. So there's constantly a lot of development of individuals. There's also a lot of just corporate changes, anything that needs to be implemented, or it's the good and the bad. There's hiring, there's also firing, which is I think everybody's least favorite part of this business. But you may have to sometimes do stuff like that. So that would probably be the closest title that a lot of them are using. I'm not part of the leadership group within the organization, but I'm certainly not the owner. So I'll never really be the owner. So that part is probably a little bit different from if you're a privately held agency. It's like my brother owns his own insurance agency. I'll never be the owner of my agency, but I deal with a lot of the same day-to-day stuff as that my brother has to do on that side, which is good to have a good kind of wall to bounce ideas off of, who always has your best interest at heart as well.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Just kind of to shift gears a little bit, kind of into that hiring kind of role that you mentioned. Can you give some overview, or are there some kind of questions that you're usually asked to kind of look for these like strengths in these potential brokers or producers? And then just kind of like, what advice would you give to someone coming out of college or a couple years into like their current position to kind of prepare for like these interviews?
Yeah, great question. When it comes to interviews, granted, did one with you, which you probably will say mine are not very structured. I really just try and chat with somebody. I want to hear how they look at different items in the world, and or see how they're really made up. I think that people who are entrepreneurial tend to do really well in wholesale. I think somebody who needs a lot of direction tends to do a little bit more on the carrier side. And call it following the exact same processes over and over again. I think is more of a carrier type underwriter. When you look at the sort of the stuff that we're seeing, it's very much so service driven. Mm-hmm. So, how quickly are you getting back to your clients? How quickly are you getting them what they're looking for? While still delivering the best product, but delivering it in a timely fashion. So I think people that tend to have really good customer service skills, and tend to kind of have that hustle entrepreneurial do really, really well in wholesale. Whereas it's not box underwriting. This isn't, selling it to the chief underwriting officer on why this is a good risk. If it doesn't fit the box, there's no really selling it to anybody. This is somebody else's paper. This isn't our paper. Move on to the next one, decline, or send it out to a brokerage market and see if somebody else can bite there. And it's a little bit more of a hustle game. So I try and figure out, if they are the person who tends to be more proactive or more reactive.
Yeah, no, that's some good insight. And just from, a hiring perspective, like now in this environment, can you briefly talk about, has it become more difficult like in the last 6 months to kind of find these applicants, or using like LinkedIn, or what's kind of, like your tools, I guess?
Yeah, and great question. What's interesting, and I'll pick on one of the girls in my office, Maggie Cahill. So we hired her from a competitor, and she jokes to everybody that how I recruited her was I slid into her DMs. And what she means by that is on LinkedIn, just being proactive. If you see somebody whose resume kind of falls in line with what you're looking for and sees that they're active, and then get a little bit of feedback from other carriers who you have common contacts with. Yeah, I just reached out to her direct. I just sent her a message. You want to grab a cup of coffee and chat about what we have going on, and I'd like to hear more about where do you like your where do you see your career path going, and do those things intersect with what we have and what you really are looking for. So it hasn't changed a whole lot. That's kind of still just what I do, and find the people that I think would be a good fit and just reach out. And I've had people reach out to me and just kind of the same route. No real secret sauce there. I do think that what's going to be a challenge is still interviewing like brand new to the industry. That part I think is going to be a little bit more tough, because their career fairs aren't really as the same as they were 5 years ago. I'm glad WSA is doing theirs next month or later. No, they are this month. So I think that will be, kind of a little bit better. But in not having those, over the last 2 years, I think it became a little bit more of a challenge. And say we kind of, as an industry, fell back on having that. But we did. And then all of a sudden, when we didn't have it, I think people didn't hire as much as they should have a year ago on the right out of college crew, which is, I think, what is kind of fueling a lot of this war on talent, because we almost had 2 years of nobody joining these companies out of school. So you had fewer people coming in. So now we're all fighting for the same people there. Whereas I think if we would have put a bigger push on college grads 2 years ago or a year ago, we might not be in the same position as we are right now.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting kind of perspective, and just reflecting on my college days, just kind of with like, it takes practice, to kind of go to the career fairs. Like, thankfully for me, I was going since like freshman year, but say, you're a freshman and you go to any sophomore, you go to any, and now it's like your junior year when you like need to get an internship, or, trying to get yourself in a position for like full time. Like it takes practice to kind of get like that sense of how it works, how long is this conversation? I walk up and hand my resume, or just kind of like that feel for it. And if you don't have the opportunity and you're like in the situation where it's like crunch time and you're like, wow, I need to do this and I need to do well, like that's kind of a lot of pressure if you're not like, if
you can very much so tell when people are prepared and when they're not.
Yeah.
That yes, there are freshmen and sophomores walking around those, and you can tell who they are. But when they then become juniors and seniors, you can tell how much they stick out amongst their peers. And I definitely think that, when I met you, that wasn't your junior year, that was early.
That was my freshman year.
And it was memorable enough to know, like, don't get me wrong, I totally aged myself while I was there. I was like, oh my God, that's college now. Wow. I'm an old man, and I'm not, but it was different. But
Yeah.
then when you kind of see the same people coming around year over year to the same conferences, you then also know which people you want to align yourself with as well. Like, hey, if this person is here 3 times, they're going to be somebody who's going to be memorable in our business. So when you reached out, yes, I already knew who you were. I had already had a LinkedIn message from you thanking me for meeting you 2 years earlier. And that does stand out. So I think that the folks that are in your spot that are being more proactive are definitely going to reap the rewards of that, and are going to have good, difficult decisions, because they're going to have multiple companies that they get to decide on what they want to do after graduation. Whereas I think the people who are coming way late to the game, are kind of just going to have to take whatever they get. And it's just, that's kind of everything.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it. And as we wrap up here, just kind of a question on the lighter side. If you weren't working in insurance, what would you be doing and why?
So my dream job. So I'm hoping that I eventually still get to have this job, is a starter at a golf course. Because one, I don't think I'll be able to live my current lifestyle if I was just a starter at a golf course. But my goal is to be a starter at a golf course, because nothing is more fun than, getting to the first tee box and teeing off. So I get to see everybody who's at the best part of their day every day. So I don't have to deal with anybody's problems.
Yeah.
You're just the very beginning. And then I would be finishing the last round. I'd be jumping in and playing golf with kind of the last group of the day every day. So that's my actual dream job that I hope I get to do, after the insurance business. So I don't know if that is kind of a cop out of an answer, but I stumbled into insurance. I had no clue. I found out, got 2 interviews at a career fair that both resulted in job offers. One was Quicken Loans, so selling mortgages, and the other was Liberty Mutual, selling insurance. And I picked Liberty Mutual because the salary was $1,500 more than the mortgage deal was. So I stumbled into this business, and I'm glad I did, because it ended up being a great decision. One, because the mortgage industry crashed 2 years later, so that was lucky. But that's not why I picked insurance. I just did it because it sounded like, more fun party money as a college kid. And I'm very fortunate all the people that have helped me along the way. But it was the right choice looking at it now.
Yeah, well, we're happy you came to the insurance industry, and thanks so much for hopping on here.
Thank you, Darren.